Google's constantly testing new ad formats to go on search, mobile, the Google Display Network, all sorts of things. And one of the more recent versions is the responsive display ads. So over the past couple of years, they've been getting rid of all of the just plain text ads and using responsive display ads to take those gaps instead. So what this allows advertisers to do is upload some images, logos, and then still use some customized text in the form of headlines and descriptions. And then in real time, it will put those together in a combination to fill the ad space that would normally be populated by either just a text ad or just an image ad on the GDN. One of the things that I think is most important about these ads for advertisers to consider are the images themselves. Just the same way in social, the thing that gets people to pay attention and stop scrolling through their feed is the image. On the GDN, for these responsive ads, it's kind of the same thing. If you just see some text off to the side, you might miss it. You're probably going to miss it. And that's honestly one of the reasons that Google got rid of just the text ad only format in the first place. People just stopped engaging with it because the web has gotten more advanced over the years, and just text doesn't stand out anymore, even if it's blue and green and whatever the ad formatting is that they've got on these things. So what we need to do is keep the images in mind and the logos that we're using for our businesses while we're putting these ads together. And we need to make sure that the images we choose and the logos and the way that we represent them are brand safe, but are also eye-catching and convey the message that we want it to have, and that it's clear. One of the big things we'll talk about today is scaling on these, because sometimes even if an image looks fantastic large, that doesn't mean that every instance of it could actually make any sense. So today what we're going to do is run through some just typical best practices for responsive display images on the GDN. Let's jump in. When we go into the Google Ads platform and we want to create a responsive display ad, it's pretty simple. Just go into any of your display campaigns, head over to the Ads and Extensions tab, and then click the blue plus button. It'll allow you to choose responsive display ad right off the top. So I'm just going to do that and hop right into the builder itself. Okay, so over here on the left, you'll see the entire builder when you're trying to put together responsive display ads. So again, you've got headlines, long headline, description, all this good stuff. But today I want to focus on just the images and the logos. And as we go through this, I'm going to be using some examples that wouldn't necessarily go together, but each of the examples makes my point for different points. So don't expect that I'm going to have one complete ad by the time that we get done with this. So when you first click on the images and logos piece, it'll bring up this place where you can choose which images and logos you want to use. So as soon as you click on the images and logos button, you're going to notice that there is this builder here, and there are a number of different options of how you can actually add images to the campaigns. The first and the default is going to be to scan your website. Then you can choose to upload just direct file from your computer. There's also a stock image section that we'll run through here in just a minute, as well as recently used. So anything that's been in your campaign, anything that you've chosen from recently will be in here as well. And then the last piece is the Your Assets section. What this means is that these are the assets you have chosen for this particular responsive display ad. So by the time we get done with this, we want to make sure we have at least one square image and logo available for this ad that we're creating. So let's go through each of these and talk about how we can get some examples. So the first is just the scan your website function. This is pretty easy, and I'm going to start off by talking about the logos that we're going to use for our campaigns, because I think that's usually where we're going to get things from the scan the website section. So let's go to an example for Spotify, because I think they have a good logo that helps exemplify what we need to do for our logos. Just type in your URL, click enter, and it will populate things from your website. It has already scanned it. If you scroll down even further, here's the cool part. It'll also pull in from your Facebook profile, your Twitter profile, Instagram, LinkedIn, any of the different ones. So if you want to scan that, just click scan. And it'll pull up the different logos or images that it can find that it thinks are available on your Facebook page. Same thing would be true for Twitter and whatnot as well. So just keep that in mind, that you can also scan your social profiles if that makes sense. So for right now, I want to stick with what's on the website. When we start to put our ads together, we want to make sure that we have logos and images. So these are two separate pieces. Like I said, I'm going to start with the logos. So the first is that we might say, okay, this one down here is a great logo. So we click on that. It says use as, and we can choose to use it as the logo. Wonderful. It's already pre-populated as the 1-to-1, but it does not fit for the 4-to-1 format, and we need to have one of each available. So I'm actually just going to click cancel on this because I want to use one image to accomplish both. I find it easier to do that if you can. So instead, what we can do is click on this one, use it as the logo, and then you'll notice that over here, this 4-to-1 ratio looks great. You can then click this, drag it down a little bit, move it around, do whatever you want, and make sure that you've got things centered up. Now for the 1-to-1 logo, this looks a little bit weird, right? There's not really a place that makes sense, and because it doesn't encapsulate all of it. I mean, it kind of does if you do just Spotify, but then you've got a bunch of negative space up here and down here. So what you can actually do is scroll over, and then you can choose this little toggle and scale it down to the actual size that you want it to be for 1-to-1. And the editor here will always keep things in a 1-to-1 ratio. So you get things centered up, everything looks good, hit continue, and now it is chosen as your logo for the 1-to-1 and the 4-to-1. And you'll notice that the Your Assets section has these two chosen. So you can always come in here and check out what's going on. So you can see that we've got the logo squared away, and then we have some more images that we can have in here as well. So now let's look for some images. So we can go back to the Scan Your Website piece. I actually want to do a different example for this because I think it exemplifies the point a little bit more. So instead, let's say that we want to do something for a travel website. Right? I have a client that does luxury travel, luxury international travel, and one of the things that they offer are safari tours. So people love to see zebras and whatnot on safari. And this is a real life example of something that we kind of had to choose which images we wanted to use for responsive display ads. So here's what they kind of looked like. We used the stock image piece, and we went in here and we just typed in zebras. And you can see that a number of different options come up. They all have this Shutterstock watermark on it, but as soon as you choose it and actually turn things live, that watermark will go away. So just keep that in mind. But you can see there are a number of different options in here for zebras overall, right? So there are a number of different pieces. What we ended up with were these two down here on the bottom. So we liked this one because we thought that it made a good statement that there could be a lot of zebras in the Serengeti, right? You might see a lot of animals because that's what people want. But here's the problem. When we look to scale the images of these ads, it gets a little bit muted. So I'm going to go ahead and just add this as the landscape and the square image. And then as a comparison, I'm going to use this one. I'm going to actually scale this up a little bit, bring this over here. Okay, so now we've got both of those chosen as our images. And again, this is not a reasonable example here because we've got a Spotify logo and some zebras, and that doesn't make any sort of sense. So just bear with me for the sake of example. So now we've got these images in here, and we are looking at how they are going to actually look on the Google Display Network. Right now it's defaulting to mobile, and it's cycling through the key ad formats that it has in this preview over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is click pause, so it'll stop scaling through everything really quickly. You can then come over here and click through the different ad formats and see where it's going to show up. So one of the things that we ran into is that we actually noticed that the desktop previews of these were causing some issues. So we had this image ad, right? So we chose the image that we thought had a lot of animals in it. And if you start to look at it in some of these areas, you think, okay, that looks pretty good. You can see a number of different zebras, that sort of thing. This one's starting to get a little bit dicey. So we kept going through all the different ad previews, and the biggest area we had issues with was the native ad format. Because you'll notice that when you come down here to this super small version of what the image is, this could be anything. It's barely recognizable that this is a group of zebras. You can kind of tell that it's the sun, you can probably infer that there are animals there, but it's really not going to catch your eye while you're just browsing the web, right? It just doesn't, it's not eye-catching if you're thinking that you want to take a safari trip. This probably isn't going to scream at you. And even though it goes against the logic that people wanted to see lots of animals, we actually found that the best version of this smallest image was actually the single zebra by itself. People don't want to go on a safari and see just one zebra, but this was still eye-catching enough and it was dynamic that people still responded to it well, even once the image had been scaled down that far. So think about the scale of the image in all of the different ad formats that could be coming out when you're choosing the images that are coming through here. So all these different image ads, again, you might see that some of these look okay, but it's a little bit more dynamic and it's much more eye-catching when you actually see this one zebra by itself. It stands out. You can then take a look at it and you can kind of see that there's another zebra in the background a little bit. It's just something that will get people to stop scrolling. So when you're choosing your images for responsive display ads, think about not only what does it look like when it's in a larger format, but once it starts getting a little bit smaller, or if it starts being on a mobile device, is it going to be clear what you're trying to sell and what you're trying to offer to the user, and is it going to be compelling enough for them to click on the ad? And that's it. Relatively simple, but something really important to keep in mind while you're choosing the images and the logos. You want to make sure that things actually make sense, they fit in the boxes, and they're recognizable at any different scale on the GDN, because otherwise you're basically just putting an ad out there that's not really compelling. You're probably not going to get a lot of clicks, and it's just going to be a waste of time and effort. So make sure that you're paying attention to what all of the different previews are. Like I said, Google's constantly coming out with new formats, testing new things, testing new variables. So if you start to notice something new, make sure that you're clicking through all of the different previews they have available, choose different images, test different things, and make sure that you're using the one that's going to work best for your business in the long term. Thanks for watching our video.
Make sure to subscribe to the Paid Media Pros channel to see more videos.